Skyscrapers are the symbol of wealth and modernity. They dominate the skyline to the point where they become intrinsic to a city's image. Investors, politicians, and the general public seem to be loving them. And why wouldn't they? Skyscrapers are big and shiny, usually at least, and a true status symbol. And I am here to ruin the fun and tell you why skyscrapers are actually pretty stupid and why we shouldn't build them. My view is that in 99.9% of the cases, you don't even need to go above 10 floors. And so let's examine the main problems with skyscrapers that prevent them from being a good idea. Problem number one is their environmental impact, because turns out a big hunk of glass and metal is hard to cool or heat. And to quote this Guardian article about it, electricity use per square meter of floor area was nearly 2.5 times greater in high-rise office buildings 20 or more stories than in low-rises 6 stories or less. The gas used for heating was about 40% more for tall buildings, and the total carbon emission from these buildings was twice as high. But hang on a second, you might say. It is entirely possible to build environmentally friendly skyscrapers that aren't just a big mass of steel and glass. To which I say, sure, but it still doesn't solve the second problem, cost. In general, the taller you build, the more expensive it gets. And this is a problem because that means affordable housing and affordable office space are out the window. If big investors put up a bunch of money to build a skyscraper, the first thing they will want is returns. And that usually doesn't mean affordable 1 or 2 room apartments. If the spreadsheet says high-end luxury condos equal most big number, then that's what's getting built. Meaning that for skyscrapers to meaningfully address the housing shortage and not just become a rich people tower, the state would need to step in. But the thing is, if we really put up an affordable residential skyscraper with state support, that still wouldn't eliminate problem number 3, alienation. Because turns out living on the 50th floor makes it really difficult to socialize with people. Inside residential towers, there is rarely any meaningful social spaces. If you want any human contact, you have to go down to the park or something. But going down to the park from the 50th floor is not the same as going down to the park from the 5th floor. One takes 5 minutes and the other takes 15. The lack of quick and easy access to a social space promotes alienation. People will just stay in their apartments, they will not get to know each other. Here, the best case scenario is some people on the same floor kinda knowing each other. Whereas if you spread things out into a nice low-rise area with plenty of parks and public spaces between the buildings, people will spend more time there and socialize more, because getting to those places is no longer a hassle. Problem number 4 is logistics. If you focus a lot of people in a small area, public infrastructure has to keep up somehow. Aside from the need of gigantic parking lots and high-capacity public transit, you also need to build out stuff like daycare centers, elementary schools, high schools, retail, public amenities, and you also need to scale this up for tens of thousands of people. And if you have a bunch of office towers, you will end up with an area that is extremely busy during work hours, but otherwise it's completely deserted. And so, for me, these are the 4 main problems with skyscrapers. They are energy intensive, unaffordable, they alienate you from other people, and they're quite the logistical headache. Now, in the beginning, I've mentioned that I don't think there's any need to build anything taller than 10 stories in 99.9% of cases. And so let me show you why. This is the Burj Khalifa. It is 828 meters tall and has 163 floors. According to its fact sheet, it has 172,000 square meters of residential space and 28,000 square meters of office space. So these numbers sound pretty impressive, right? That's a lot of residential and office space. And so I present to you this building. It's the so-called faluház or village house in Budapest, the biggest prefab concrete residential block in Hungary from the 70s. The name village house comes from the fact that this thing houses as many people as an entire village. It has more than 3,000 inhabitants in 884 apartments. It's a 10-story building with a total residential floor space of 43.5 thousand square meters. And so this right here is the plot on which the Burj Khalifa stands. On it we could easily fit 5 entire village houses. And if we turn 4 of them into residential blocks and 1 of them into an office, we get 174,000 square meters of residential space, 2,000 more, and 43.5 thousand square meters of office space, or 15.5 thousand square meters more. In other words, 5 10-story tall commie blocks was all it took to beat the world's tallest skyscraper. And that should really tell us something. So to reiterate, skyscrapers can only be used for 2 things really, office space and residential space, and they're kinda bad at both of those. For residents, skyscrapers are like any other apartment building basically, but with the added disadvantages of living very high above the ground. And the view might be nice, but trust me, it gets old really quickly. And for office workers, skyscrapers are, well, let's just say that COVID-19 has shown us that we don't need so much goddamn office space. Because turns out most of us can work on our computers just as easily from home as we can in the office. And considering how most offices nowadays are the open plan hellscapes, except for your bosses, I think this is a change for the better. You know, I really do think that skyscrapers are just this big, dumb, afterthought kind of solution to the very real problem of lack of housing stock and office space in major urban settlements. But then why not start elsewhere? Why not do intelligent, complex urban planning and eliminate instances of wasteful use of public space? Cars, for example, are a huge waste of space. They take up lots of space and they spend 90% of their lifetime parked. So what if, instead of building a skyscraper, we begin by reducing the number of cars in the city and build some medium-sized apartment blocks on the now vacant gigantic parking lots? What if we reduced and regulated short-term lease services like Airbnb? Because that alone can occupy a huge part of the housing stock in any major settlement. As you can see, when it comes to handling housing shortages and lack of space in major cities, there's a myriad of other points where we can start that are easier and more effective. Oh, and they also don't cost as much as building a skyscraper. So this would be my case against them. I'm not completely opposed to the idea though, but I think they should be considered only if we have exhausted all the other previous available options. I think that would lead to much better outcomes, both for people and for cities. Thank you for watching. Like and subscribe if you haven't already, and if you want to show your appreciation for my content, then there is a Patreon link in the description, and I'll be seeing you next time.